Вся человеческая история – это об одном, об эволюции, то есть о развитии. Исконный общечеловеческий драйв, движение к тому, чтобы становиться все более и более и более реальными. И мы двигаемся к реальности по нескольким фундаментальным путям. В древности говорили о 3 главных путях – истина, добро и красота, что означает путь объективного познания мира, который сейчас олицетворяет наука, научная истина, о том, как оно есть, законы природы, закон устройства всего и вся. Красота, путеводная нить, связанная с этим, художники всех областей исследуют этот мир и несут нам весть о мире через произведения. Это нелогичная, метафорическая, объемная, сложная, многомерная весть о том, какова реальность. И, конечно же, то, что олицетворяет словом морали, связанными с ними общечеловеческими ценностями. Есть некая нить, по которой мы движемся, некие лестницы, ведущие нас все дальше и дальше и дальше и дальше. Мы впервые стали понимать, что мы не просто находимся в потоке эволюции, который нас несет, но что мы можем этим потоком управлять.
All of us are looking for love, to grow, are looking to discover our true identity. And unfortunately, our culture really doesn't know much about our true identity or how to cultivate love. Many people look in mistaken ways, and much of the suffering in the world can be seen as an expression or reflection of unskillful ways of looking for happiness and love.
Normally we perceive, we smell, we taste, we touch, which reminds us of what we forgot to do yesterday, and therefore we become anxious about what we have to do tomorrow. So we live in a cycle of regrets of the things that we forgot to do and dreads of the things that we have to do, which makes us ill.
If you look at almost every ancient tradition, it arises out of what we now call shamanism, but really it arises out of understanding that we are part of the natural world and that intelligence is found in all parts of the natural world. However it happened, we gradually separated more and more from nature. Nature itself can no longer support us in the way it has, and not only the human species is in literal danger of extinction, but a great many other parts of the animal plant world are also endangered by that same human species.
So I would call that covert practice. You're practicing dismissiveness so we can practice bad habits. We are practicing creatures, but what are we practicing?
We are confronted worldwide by overpopulation, by nuclear waste, by terrorism, by economic inequality, terrible inequality, by destruction of our environment. All these problems we can meet only if we act consorted as one human family. In this precarious situation, most terrible aspect is that the religions, all the religions, one of the major sources of disunity, fighting with one another and within one another.
Сложность духовного развития, духовной эволюции в наше время, как мне видится, во многом, потому что в обществе нет консенсуса. Отсутствует инфраструктура. Она либо умирает, либо в муках рождается какая-то новая структура. Это разговоры о том, как построить систему, в которой бы человек мог эволюционировать.
Пространство исполнено игры, оно готово играть с нами в любые игры. Игра в язык, игра в простые правила законодательные. Это можно, это нельзя. В политические системы, игра в виртуозные экономические системы, игра в деньги, игра в брачные отношения, игра в педагогику, спортивные игры. И пошло, и поехало. Да? Любой аспект, какой ни возьми, это все игровой набор с определенным количеством правил, Выиграв, они получают определенный статус, счет в банке и так далее, и так далее. Все игровые расклады.
I had a colleague, he and a group of other people started a business some years ago. This business, within 2 years, it grew very fast. It was financially very successful. But within those 2 years, 2 of the 7 founders had gotten cancer. 2 others had gotten divorced, and 1 had a breakdown. Think about it, what is so common that we see. If I only put my focus on business, and I don't think of family, I don't think of health, I don't think of planet, what happens? The planet suffers, the family suffers, the health suffers. It's obvious. This is not sustainable, right? This is not fit for the future.
It's true that human beings grow and develop, but there are 4 or 5 major different areas that they can grow and develop in. So there are things like states of consciousness. So states are how we get plugged into ultimate reality. Infinite spirit, pure Godhead, the ground of all being. But these structures of consciousness, archaic, magic, mythic, rational, pluralistic, are actually how we interpret our relative world. And they're also how we will interpret our spiritual experiences. So both of these turn out to be very important. We can go through states and we can go through structures.
For me, one of the biggest and dangerous illness in this era is the voice in this planet. People don't listen to each other. If people doesn't produce the right connection and synchronization between breathing, body, bones, skeleton, space. Tell the people it's very important to breathe in order to produce a very healthy voice.
You know, what is intention? What is soundless sound? What is the sound before sound? We don't know what hypnosis is, we don't know what trance is, we don't know what any of these things are because we don't have the language. And, we don't have the concepts to translate the words that they have.
Внешний, личностный, проявленный имидж мы нарабатываем благодаря тому, что на нас как-то реагируют. То есть говорят: о, как ты сказал, о, прям ты так рукой сделал, ты такой свободный. Все, и мы начинаем в этом потихонечку застревать и выдавать набор таких ожидаемых реакций, чтобы получать лайки и репосты. А есть моя душа. Может сейчас быть грустно. Могу ли я позволить себе жить душой, может быть, даже не соответствуя ожиданиям или даже шокируя немножко людей вот сегодняшней своей просто будничностью?
We humans, with a little effort, can experience within ourselves that we live in what the poet Rilke calls the double realm. One realm is material and is in time and space, and the other one is immaterial and above time and space. We can speak about it only in metaphorical language, but we can go into ourselves, and try that now, and watch yourself. So I can watch myself sitting here and talking, and you can watch yourselves in whatever position you are. We're watching. If there is someone left who is now watching the watcher, then go back and watch the watcher that's watching the watcher. And you can go back without much effort until you reach the point where you are the watcher whom nobody else can watch anymore. That is the self.
We are made of sound. Sound is nature. And sound is light, depending on the speed. Sound is in the basis of all manifestation. Sound can be heard, physical. Sound can be feel, vibration, inner sound. but sound is also secret.
One of the things we know about breathing is that it can be used to improve health, to improve stamina, to overcome all kinds of conditions, and to clarify thought. And out of breathing comes meditation, out of meditation comes yoga, which is saying let's make the whole body work more smoothly, more naturally. And then we have psychology. And psychology has given us, or psychotherapy has given us the notion that your early memories matter. And that seeing patterns within childhood that were again expressed as adults, and sometimes in a way that was dysfunctional. And that if one could understand one's background better, that one's foreground would improve. And so that's a Western psychology, and even mainstream psychology, contribution to the evolution of the species.
And what happened in the social life? Husband and wife. They love each other in the first moment, but suddenly something happened. I hate her voice. I hate his voice. He speaks like that. It's because you never was aware about listen the other. You can hear everywhere. You can everybody. But listen, to go deep, like observe, is not see. Observe is go to the detail, to the deep point.
The source of everything, like a magnetic field, but it's not magnetic, it's what human beings can feel. Physicists can't quite measure it. And it moves us all a little bit. It's earth-based, it's universe-based. And when you're in touch with that field, you feel best. Thank you to the bells for supporting this.
I believe that visionary art is a transmission from the visionary state. I believe that it's a process the divine creator of the cosmos is working with us, sending us relevant, important, perhaps mythic, archetypal messages in our divine imagination, as Blake called it. They may be vital medicine for our evolution.
The source of all creativity is the divine, the great force of the universe or the almighty, genderless, faceless force of light and love. What we practice, art as a spiritual path, your effort is to channel the divine through your art, your music, your dance, to feel in touch, in the zone with.
Когда-то я для себя открыл, еще будучи настоятелем монастыря, Иисус говорил «Царство Божие внутри». И я начал об этом проповедовать сам вон, прямо на каждой проповеди говорю, что не ищите Бога где-то в небесах, Он внутри, Господь внутри. И одна благочестивая бабушка-прихожанка подходит ко мне и говорит: «Батюшка, ну что вы одно и то же заладили? А вот русские сельские бабушки, они прямые, они батюшке в лоб, прям шелбана дадут попу». Говорит: «Что вы заладили? Бог-то внутри, да мы снаружи».
Через себя мы все открываем и все познаем. С собой мы все соотносим, с собой мы все измеряем. Это ключевая идея философии, потому что она отражает давным-давно наблюдаемый факт, что в основе нашего познания мира отправная точка всего и вся, всей нашей жизни, всех наших измерений – это мы сами. Я есть человеческой ситуацией, человеческим существованием, экзистенциальным измерением жизни или просто я. И с вопрошания о природе «я», с открытия того, что такое «я», с опоры на «я», с открытием истинного «я» начинаются очень многие духовные пути.
Since I was 18 years old, actually, I've been thinking about near-death experiences. And I think we all know the pattern by now that people all over the world talk about at the moment of death seeming to leave their bodies and going through a passageway into another world, seeing a light and seeing their life in review, and meeting relatives and friends who've passed away, and coming back transformed.
When you use the term personality, most people have an idea that they have one, or it's about themselves, or there's a core that is separate from the world and internal to themselves. And that ranges from Buddhism, which says there's no self, there's just an agglomeration, an aggregate, kind of like granite, of little pieces which form literally a form, and at death the form dissolves back into pieces. B.F. Skinner, behaviorism, pretty much says the same thing, even though they disagree at every other possible level. Freud originally believed that inside every person there were different selves, and there was a term called disassociation for mental illness, which was the separation of the internal selves. And then in between, there are simply theorists that talk about how to improve one's life. And the theory of personality is vague. Say Maslow and Rogers, really the humanists, don't have a theory of personality. They have an assumption. And the assumption is there's one personality. Improve it, you can uplift it. You have people like Assagioli who talk about sub-personalities, little bits. Think back to the Buddhists. But he has a super personality, a higher self that one feeds into. And a lot of spiritual systems which go beyond the psychology have the notion of there's a kind of higher, better self than the one you can be.
Sound is an extremely powerful way of becoming present. There are many ways of getting there. You know, the Tibetans talk about the path of renunciation. You become a monk or a nun and you give everything up, or the path of transformation, where you take one thing and you turn it into something else, like the shadow of Jung. Spontaneous liberation, like Dzogchen in the Tibetan tradition, for example. And most spiritual paths within the category of transformation, where you turn the dark, the shadow, or the difficult, and you flip it, that you use the material from which you are able to switch into something positive.
Я думаю, я говорю, я наблюдаю, я все воспринимаю, я исследую. Есть весь другой мир, объекты, предметы, живые существа, другие люди, но это не я. И есть глубинное измерение и я, и не я, которое называется основополагающее, или сущностное, или духовное, или божественное измерение. То есть я, есть не я, и есть Бог.
If it comes, what we popularly call it, say, coming from the heart. If you feel that it's right, if you feel that it's what you're doing is good for the other, and it's not bad for anything around, that it promotes life. Love basically is good for the other person, just as good as for oneself, because it promotes two of us together.
The ego is simply the sick I, sick because it has forgotten the self, and sick because the moment it forgets the self, it becomes fearful. Tiny little I in the middle of millions and billions of other eyes, and so it's afraid this other eye is going to get ahead of me, so it becomes violent, it becomes rivalrous, it becomes greedy, and the healing process is that the ego is shaking up. Wait a moment, you're not that little ego, you are the I, myself. Remember the self. Live in the awareness that we are all one.
We don't practice breathing. We don't try to destroy the crystal inside of my joints. They become dry, they become sticky like that. When people practicing this kind of technique, they start to feel step by step how important it is to develop awareness about who I am inside. Concentrate inside, concentrate in your bone, and after that, you will find the inside.
Когда я открыт любой новой встрече, любой новой теории, любой новой возможности, любому новому пространству, то тогда я с этой бесконечностью в резонансе, я пульсирую, я живу. И раз – расширение. Вот тут я ухожу, и у меня блаженство медитативности. Почему? Потому что я доверился незнакомому контексту. Или молитвами Джима Керри ты говоришь всему «да», или ты просто гражданин «нет», и тогда всему пульсирующему, текущему ты ставишь барьер. И в виде финансового не результата жизнь тебе говорит: во, на твое «нет», пожалуйста, я тебе тоже говорю «нет». И любовь говорит «нет» тогда. То есть или принцип «да», и я взаимодействую, пробую, ну подошло, не подошло, ну пробуй, иди там. Или принцип «нет».
Когда я утром просыпаюсь и не хочется жить, опять нужно идти сюда, сколько забот, муж такой, ребенок такой, босс такой и так далее. Нужно зарабатывать деньги, которые я трачу на еду. Круг правил моей жизни, он не воодушевляет меня к продолжению жизни. И человек притягивает определенные схемы, объясняющие эту модель мира, да? Может быть, возможно, надорвать это кольцо и войти в другой контекст правил, поместить в силовое поле осознанности, увидеть, из каких ингредиентов такой сценарий обнимает меня. Может быть, можно переписать сценарий?
Yes, we have problems, but they're processes. This is a very simple concept. Oh, I've got a stomach ache. No, I have a stomach process. It's a very big switch. Both are a good way of thinking, but the process makes more out of it.
I was kind of very surprised to find myself doing things like chanting and meditation, because at that time I believed that religions were the opiate of the masses, and I couldn't figure out why they had these effective practices and why I was getting benefit from them, and that these contemplative practices were psychologies and therapies for training the heart and mind and inducing insights and states of consciousness, and for fostering and accelerating psychological and spiritual development.
I was a very religious kid. I was the only one in my family that went to church, the only one. And I was an altar boy in the Episcopal Church. My reading took me into thinking a lot. I started to collect in my mind a catalog of ways people grow.
I've written over 25 books, and people always say, how do you find the time to write those books? And I say, you don't find the time. You have to take the time. You make the time. The key to self-coaching is discipline. Now, by discipline, I don't mean make yourself do something. I cannot make myself do something I don't want to do. But I'm really good at figuring out how to get myself to want to do something that's good for me, right? That's the key, right? Discipline is getting yourself to want to do something that's good for you and good for the whole lot.
Working with the flow from a higher source or a spiritual source is part of the intention that many artists work with. I think that to make art a spiritual practice is a little bit different, perhaps, than art as pure self-expression.
Нам важно понять суть внутренней работы. 3 главные практики, которые я делаю в себе, для себя, внутри себя, которые имеют тысячи совершенных форм. Первая практика, связанная с дифференциацией, с развлечением, все большими и большими оттенками, все большими и большими воспринимаемыми диапазонами и шкалами. Но если у меня есть, скажем, там 30, 200, 1000 оттенков восприятия внутри себя, то тогда у меня появляется 1000 оттенков восприятия других людей, восприятия предметов, восприятия мира, восприятия систем, восприятия духовности. Почему? Да потому что я воспринимаю все через себя. Если у меня этого нету, то этого нету во всех других измерениях мира, в котором я в контакте. Любая работа начинается с развлечения. И по сути, когда мы занимаемся чем угодно, развиваясь, изучаем предметы, изучаем темы, строим новые проекты, на глубинном уровне мы выстраиваем различающие шкалы. Все, что ограничивает нас, может стать направлением ускоренной эволюции. Вторая главная практика персонального измерения, которую каждый из нас делает в мире своего «я», это практика все большего и большего объединения. Развитие человека зависит ровным образом от того, в насколько глубоком контакте мы находимся с собой. То есть прямая связь. Наше развитие зависит от глубины этого контакта. Прообразом вот этой древней практики контакта с собой, конечно, является древняя шаманская практика. Объединение с миром, практика шаманского экстаза. Ну и третья фундаментальная практика, которую мы делаем в персональном измерении, это выход за пределы ума. Потому что ум, мысли, концепции, понятия образуют вот ту клетку и ту рамку, в которой мы все живем. И существует универсальная практика медитации.
Detachment from your own thoughts. Learning that you are not your thoughts. You have thoughts. Those thoughts make you the person you are, and that reveals a supreme identity beyond all thoughts. This is at the fundamental of Advaita Vedanta, or Buddhist practice particularly. Catharsis. People will cathart, without knowing what it is. They go to a play, Aristotle described it, and you start to cry, and it cleanses you, and it enlarges you, it dilates you, and you live through the tragedies and complexities in you. They resonate with your own life.
Из того, что я вижу, и то, что уже давно для себя открыли суфии в Индии, в Турции, это похоже на карма-йогу. То, что индийцы называют карма-йога. Если человек честно трудится, обеспечивает себя, обеспечивает семью, помогает другим людям, то он занимается духовной практикой.
The yoga is not that giving you discipline. The yoga teaches you how to do the thing again and again and again and again. In the West, mistake, ouch, I don't do that again. In yoga, do it again. Do it again. It's transcendent for our culture, our educators to realize the difference between don't do it that way or let's do it again.
The obstacle that I find most often in people and that can be changed fairly easily is their own self-acceptance. And we grow up in a culture that rewards being one shape and doesn't reward being another shape. We reward certain levels of strength and not other levels of strength. So we grow up having to demonstrate our adequacy instead of growing up adequate and learning about our differences. And at that point, since you like yourself, then when something beneficial comes along, it's fine that you should have it. See, one of the questions that people say, do I deserve this? And I remember working with a company, and a company said, we'll take over another company, and the first thing we do is we take the top 100 people in the company and we give them a 50% raise. And I thought, well, that's a very generous kind of company. And he said, within a year, half of them are gone. And I thought, what? What's that about? He said, the ones who felt they weren't worth that left, and the others grew until they fit that.
Кроме практик, у нас есть еще помощники, ускорители эволюции. Одного простого факта принятия себя, устойчиво принять себя, любви к себе, не осуждения себя оказывается достаточно для того, чтобы превратить все тормозящие тенденции, работающие в человеческом измерении, в движение эволюции, в развитие. Это уникальный специфический катализатор, открытый буддистами для персонального измерения. Есть два универсальных. Первый катализатор – это правда. Если у меня нет честности в отношении с собою, в персональном измерении, то нигде я правду больше не найду. Если я лгу себе, если я заблуждаюсь в отношении себя, то в силу вместе рожденности человека и мира все будет множиться, двоиться, и ложь я буду видеть в других людях, ложь я буду видеть в мире, ложь я буду видеть в духе, в учителях. Нигде, никогда я больше не найду правды. Второй универсальный катализатор – обратная связь. Этот контакт должен быть живой, я постоянно должен посылать и принимать, все меняется. И вот формой такого отношения к жизни является игровая реальность, мир как игра. То есть это означает живое, легкое, танцующее, импровизационное восприятие себя прежде всего, свободное от фиксации, схем, моделей, гибкое, открытое, всегда и везде. И постоянная обратная связь. 3 закона главных эволюции и 3 главных катализатора – это самое основное, что нам нужно практиковать для того, чтобы успешно развиваться.
Нет ничего более важного в человеческой драматургии, чем воодушевленность процессом взаимодействия, процессом жизни. Воодушевленность. Человек может иметь все, что угодно. Вот все, что он пожелает. Нет воодушевленности к жизни. И все бессмысленно. И игра дарит именно эту искру. Азарт, воодушевленность процессом взаимодействия, взаимопроникновения, рождения нового творческого акта. Все познается в игре. Необязательность – это легкость, это добровольность участия в процессе жизни. Меня никто не гонит плетьми жить. Я сам хочу.
Somebody can get a good result with many different techniques. If there's an intention that's held, if there is a good quality relationship, the ritual puts this into practice in a way that manifests. The ritual is some action that puts the intention and the relationship into some tangible form. Now that ritual could be taking a pill. This is what a placebo is. It's a ritual. But where there's an intention for healing, and there is a relationship, because all the placebo studies show who gives you the placebo makes a big difference.
We carry a powerful record of birth. And actually that when we regress there, that the experiences come in 4 major matrices, what I call basic perinatal matrices. Each of them characterized by specific emotions, specific physical feelings, and having, quite close connection to ritual spiritual life. What I call the first matrix, the situation where we are still in the womb before the onset of the delivery, the archetypes of paradise, of heaven. Transition from the first matrix to the second, with the birth starts, related to the archetype of paradise lost. And then the second matrix, which there's a lot of suffering, emotional, physical, and we have the feeling this will never end, or this will never open up, we will never get out of that. And then the third matrix is the situation where we still suffer, but we have a sense that there is a possibility of getting out of that situation. Suffering with perspective, closely related to the concept of purgatory, which is experienced as purifying fire. Then the transition from 3 to 4 is actually experienced as death and rebirth. When we are emerging, the light has what Jung would call luminous quality. It feels sacred. We are emerging into a sacred realm. So we somehow reconnect with the spiritual ground somehow. Then is the archetype of divine epiphany or psychospiritual death and rebirth.
Oh my God, a 6-year-old boy recently was on his last moments of life, And his father is crying, oh, my little boy is going to die. And the little boy turns to him. The last thing the little boy says is, why are you crying so much? If you ever need me, I'll be right there. So something in us is very process-oriented and doesn't focus only on states.
Мы должны начать очень внимательно рассматривать те ограничения, которые накладывает на нас отношения с другими людьми. Смысл эволюционный наших отношений с другими людьми состоит в том, чтобы обогатиться, расширить наше знание о реальности через отдачу себя и вбирание мира других людей. Семья как форма, в которой живет большинство людей, это тоже форма сущностного общения людей. Это место, где мы можем быть максимально открытыми ко всем. Это место, где мы учимся с самого рождения всему, и где мы максимально открыты, и через который мы максимально открыты миру. Мы могли бы сказать, что семья – это изначальная форма эволюционной практики для каждого из нас.
People, say in a practice community, start, who has the biggest satori? Who has the biggest enlightenment? Who's the most enlightened? He's more enlightened. This is ridiculous. And this is Suzuki Roshi here. We're no more comparing satoris now. Stop it. Then another way is that to say that's not enlightened behavior, it's a scolding device. Well, by that way, half the saints and mystics wouldn't qualify. You know, some of the greatest people around are bad boys and girls in a conventional sense. And I think, you know, Kohlberg's hierarchy of moral values is helpful. There's pre-conventional morality, conventional and post-conventional. And certainly Jesus was a very bad boy, going in there and turning the tables over like that. He started that whole thing.
We're all half female, half male. Different times require different kind of power feeder, power source. What we recognized was that there's a third force that connects us, through which something greater than either one of us could have imagined alone can happen. When a community is connected in the same kind of love, you can do things like build temples.
And we're in relation to all of these worlds. We're in relation to the objective world that science investigates. We're in relation to this intersubjective world that morals investigates. We're in relation to the aesthetic world of beauty and art. All of those are dimensions and areas that we also want to take into account. So as we start putting all of these together, and we start to see that there are ways that we can wake up, ways that we can grow up, ways that we can show up in all of these various areas, then we start to get, for the first time, really in history, a genuinely comprehensive view of the human being. And it does include things like enlightenment or awakening, waking up, and a realization of ultimate reality, ultimate truth, infinite spirit, radical Godhead, which is one's own deepest and truest self.
Friendships are one of the great gifts of life, and for many centuries, sages have emphasized how important good friends are. Usually we think of friendship as something that's fun and nourishing for us, but it's also possible for friendships to be the source of deep learning and insight and mutual growth. And so the question is, how do we transform them into the most effective instruments or environments for our learning?
Одна из важных черт для современного человека, для суфи, научиться смотреть на ситуацию глазами другого человека. Любой человек знает эту ситуацию. Когда он с кем-то общается, он отстаивает свою точку зрения, защищает ее, готов спорить и так далее. И встать на сторону другого человека считается слабостью. И в результате получается очень жесткая система отношений в политике и в бизнесе, когда не учитывают другого. И вот это достаточно важный навык, который не только в психологии человека и не только влияет на его собственное состояние, то есть он выходит из состояния войны, внешней такой вот с людьми конфликта, кто где какое место занял на парковке, в метро, так встал, не так встал. Потом это начинает осуществляться в жизни человека. Скажем, он становится успешным в бизнесе.
All of community is a promotion of our joint interests. It's the opposite of pure competition. Competition is not necessarily good for the other. Competition means it's good for the one who wins. You are a good citizen of your country if you are a good citizen of all countries. What is whole is the basis of all things.
Вот мне кажется, Иисус об этом говорил. «Я в тебе, там, Отче, ты во мне, они, мои ученики, в нас». Вот она, вся Адвайта в этих простых словах. Просто об этом самом резонансе, когда близость, резонанс настолько глубокий, что как будто бы это то ли мой учитель говорит, то ли это я сам уже был готов это услышать и сам себе говорю через другого.
Whatever we do in the course of the day, we do in the awareness that in everyone we meet Christ. And not only in every other human being. Every animal has this self in the animal form. And every plant has this Christ self in the plant form.
So if we are together as a group, we have a common intention. When you're creating something new, you don't know what the end result will be like. So you have a direction more than a destination. If we all focus on this common direction, this resonance begins to happen, and that's the notion of the relationship. Now, again, if it's only cognitive, that's not going to be a very rich field. There is a sense of a subtle field that begins to develop that you can actually learn to pick up. Gregory Bateson talked about this pattern that connects, pattern that connects. We attune to this pattern that connects. And then what happens is something comes. One of my processes we call intervision. When you start a group, we're not a whole on yet. There's you, there's me, there's this person, this person. It's I, you, 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 you. But in a certain moment, it's no longer me and you, it's we. Every human language has a word for we. And we does not mean me plus you plus you plus you, right? It's we as something that includes but transcends, as Ken Wilber would say.
Работа и есть игра, или если работа не превращена в игру, то мы лишаем себя той самой воодушевленности жизнью. Исчезает разделение на игру и работу. И люди, играя, уже зарабатывают все необходимые средства для поддержания себя. И формируется новый тип человека будущего, нацеленного на коммуникативность. Он не выживает иначе. Взаимосвязанность, коммуникативность. Вместе мы можем совершать великие дела.
Every single tradition said that for every single quality, if you want to develop this quality, spend time with people who have it. The first thing we can do is look for those people who embody the qualities that we want to cultivate and spend as much time as we can. The second thing is to make a commitment to use the relationships to learn and grow. One of the most helpful things I know of for transforming a friendship or particularly an intimate partner relationship is to make a commitment to a shared agreement that we are going to using our relationship to support each other's growth and learning. And once you have that shared commitment, then the relationship takes on a different quality and it has a different purpose. It has a larger purpose than just having a good time.
Подводя итог всему этому, мы могли бы сформулировать 3 основополагающие эволюционные практики для межперсонального или межчеловеческих отношений. И очевидно, что первая, самая главная практика – это быть максимально открытым. Я, наблюдая за собой, смотрю, какие концепции, какие ограничения есть у меня в отношении других людей. И стараюсь максимально, насколько реально, освобождаться от них. Вторая практика стоит в том, что я стараюсь объединяться с другим человеком, с его миром, а он старается объединяться с моим миром. Да, на уровне физическом, на уровне энергетическом, на уровне эмоциональном, на уровне душевном, на уровне духовном. И вот когда я максимально открыт, когда я способен максимально объединяться на всех возможных уровнях, вот тогда я начинаю и понимать, то есть осознавать вот эту совместную реальность, и я лучше осознаю в зеркале себя другого человека. Главной эмоциональной проблемой в межчеловеческих отношениях является гнев, является отвергание другого человека, является считание источника всех моих проблем где-то там среди других людей. И главным лекарством, которое обнаружили буддисты, оказывается, является дружественность. Восприятие всех других людей как братьев, сестер, как друзей прежде всего. Если я культивирую это состояние, этот катализатор, то ненависть, то есть основополагающая, спонтанная сила, действующая в межчеловеческих отношениях, превращается, как говорят буддисты, в зеркалоподобную мудрость. То есть тогда во всех моих отношениях, как в зеркале, я вижу других людей и вижу себя.
You came into my garden and you murdered all of my family. You came into the bar where I was sitting and you shot all of my friends in front of me. And people were screaming so loud, all my science was away. I couldn't use it. I know about double signals. They were killing each other. I could see that now. I know about ghost roles. You talk about the past or about death, then death is a ghost right now. I couldn't think. So I said, your neck is very red. He looked at me like that. My doctor, he said, told me not to come. I have such high blood pressure, this could kill me. And the man on the other side said, you could die? Yes. I could die. I had a heart attack last week. My doctor told me not to come. You see, death was a ghost role. And slowly, one man went very, very slowly to the other man, joined shoulders like that. And everybody was quiet. And we could sit down and talk.
Psychology made a decision some decades ago that said we would like to look more like science. So we're going to concentrate on things that are measurable, we will love statistics, and we will, unfortunately, in so doing, limit our view to what we can measure. And this is a very unfortunate thing for conventional psychology because it is artificially limiting its field of study.
Наука помещает человека в космическое измерение абсолютного субъекта, абсолютного наблюдателя, то есть божественную позицию, для которой весь мир является объектом, весь мир досягаем, весь мир абсолютно наблюдаем и измерим. Научный метод изменялся, обогащался, наука стала не классической, то есть квантово-релятивистской, где возникло много разных способов наблюдения мира, много разных вселенных, математическая вселенная, физическая вселенная, химическая вселенная, астрономическая вселенная, связанных с разными аспектами взгляда на мир, рассмотрение мира в разных масштабах и с разных перспектив той или иной отдельной науки. И, конечно, возникла закономерная необходимость объединять все эти знания, собрать в единое целое, то есть то, что мы называем системным подходом.
We're developing a whole new field of psychology deliberately aimed at integrating East and West, psychological and spiritual, contemplative and psychotherapeutic.
Was inspired in me by Gregory Bateson, you know, this sense of bringing together all of these different, and you could say, areas of science, you know, linguistics, psychology, systems theory, artificial intelligence and computer science, and then saying how do these come together in a way that can help us to improve human life and the lives of people. Interest to always look in NLP, we say look at the process, not the content, right? You know, look at the structure, not the content. So for example, the content could be somebody feels frustrated, somebody feels angry, somebody feels joy. But then the question is, what is the structure of the joy? You know, how do you experience?
Я вижу, что мистицизм и наука, они всегда идут рядом, они всегда на фронтире где-то. То есть настоящий ученый всегда говорит, что есть что-то там, чего мы не знаем. Ну да, мы открыли кварк, да, бозон Хиггса, да, подтвердили. Но внутри этого бозона Хиггса же тоже он из чего-то состоит. Значит, есть куда двигаться. И для мистика всегда есть. Мистик заранее говорит, ну как, Бог не познаваем до конца, мы можем как бы продвигаться, но есть черная материя. Даже вот эта бескрайность всего 4%. А что там находится, мы не знаем. И, собственно говоря, может быть, это и есть Бог, что оттуда приходит. И мистики говорили, Бога вы никогда не можете познать. Вы в себе отражение можете увидеть Его.
Quantum mind, process mind, all these earth-based psychology, all these names are very important to me because they try to pull science and psychology and spirituality closer together.
All the different disciplines are great to themselves and need to be developed
We
by
need
themselves.
science, but not without art.
But we need to somehow find a way for them to work together and move together.
Reality, as Lily Tomlin put it, was a collective hunch. Postmodern came in, but all of those claims it was making, that there are no universal truths, there are no big pictures, all truth is socially constructed, all truth depends on context. Every single one of those was claimed to be true for all people, at all places, at all times. Complete universal truths. These were not open to interpretation. These were not socially constructed. These were truth, period. That's what started to happen with the emergence of this new integral level. It had a fifth-person perspective, so it could reflect on the fourth person, postmodern. And it could see not only their differences, but something they couldn't see, which were the universals, the things that were true for all people. And of course they acknowledge there are differences for all people, absolutely. But there are also commonalities. There are also things that are the same for people.
The true is the whole. And in a sense, all of the new system sciences, information sciences, show that when you're evolving a system, it must be coherent. And for it to survive, to develop, to flourish, you must promote that coherence in it. And the system is never alone, never by itself. Strictly speaking, there is no such thing as evolution. There's only co-evolution. You are co-evolving with all things around you. Everything else is ultimately devolution. Everything else is negative. So thinking that you're doing much good for your own country means that by disregarding the others, you're not doing good to your own country either.
If you think of most education, it is usually the replacement of a belief that is less functional with one that's more functional. Is there a way to take these, whatever my assumptions are, and help people to lead better, more humane, more compassionate, more accepting, and happier lives? How can we make the world we're in, if not better for everyone, some theories, at least better for me, some other theories? We do have tools to work on consciousness. We have tools from, again, the earliest spiritual traditions. We have tools from our relationship with plants, and we have contemporary tools using high technology.
So we need a vision, a framework that is adequate to the secret divinity that we harbor. That's number one. Secondly, science has given us the ways and means of research, of finding out more, because we do not now know enough to really understand who we are. So we need a vision, and it needs to be filled in by research today in the wide world, in all of our great initiatives in this realm of exploring our greater human nature, enlightenment, expanding consciousness, etc., have to keep improving our practices. So that's three things: the vision, philosophy, research always enriching that, and practices improving. And the fourth thing that we have to have is social support, cultural support, institutional support for these practices.
The contemplative traditions have these common aims, so it's not surprising they would have common practices. So when you look below the surfaces, you find they're trying to cultivate the same qualities and capacities of heart and mind that will allow us to live as fully and effectively and joyfully and truly as we possibly can. All of them, over history, the great sages recognized that we really do need to cultivate certain qualities, these 7 capacities, capacities such as ethical living, living in a way which is beneficial to ourselves and others, reducing and releasing painful, destructive emotions like anger and fear and jealousy, and cultivating beneficial emotions like love and compassion and joy. Redirecting motivation away from our obsession with things and acquiring possessions. And shifting motivation towards motives which are more beneficial both to us and others, like learning and contribution and service, and fostering sensitive awareness, because our capacity for sensitively experiencing what's going on both in ourselves and in others really determines how much we can see what's true and how effectively we can respond. And cultivating wisdom, developing an understanding of life and how to respond most effectively to it, and culminating in service, the recognition that our life isn't lived just for ourselves alone. It's lived in order to benefit as many people as we can.
Let your parents tell you, oh, you should get a master's of business administration, but if it makes you miserable, what's the point? If you study philosophy, then when you're young, then in the natural course of events, you will be reconciled to death. Plato said, philosophy is a rehearsal for dying, and it really is.
По сравнению с трехмерной картой, древней, внутреннее, внешнее и сущностное, божественное, духовное, у нас есть другая карта реальности, которая состоит из внутреннего межсубъектного множества внутренних миров, объединенных в связи в отношения, объектного, то есть внешнего, единичного, и межобъектного, системного знания. Следующий вопрос, который возникает, ну а где же истина?
For all of the first tier levels thought that their truths and values alone were real. The integral level thought that there was some important, if partial, truths to all previous levels, that all of them had to be included in an overall picture of human beings and what we can do and what our potentials are. That was never believed before, that had never happened before. And so all of a sudden now we have some mental attitudes that have changed, asking the fundamental question, which is, which of these systems is right and which of them are wrong? They changed that to saying, how can they possibly all be right? Because no mind is capable of producing 100% error. As we say, nobody's smart enough to be wrong all the time. So that was an entirely different approach to philosophy, psychology, reality, sociology, arts. It wasn't saying which is right and which is wrong, which is right and which is wrong. But how can there be a universe where all of these fit?
For me, the idea of synchronizing my existence is also an idea to break the frontal, no frontal. Then the fluidity of synchronization brings me here, there, here, there, here, there. What is necessary in the next point is coming together with the next point and dissolve or integrate and come together with the next point. And of course, myself, I cross over many kind of discipline. I do exhibition, I do costume, I do theater, dance, I do therapy, I cook, I do many things. I am agricultural. I like to plant garden and to have my onions. I like cows and pigs. So I don't have a difference between one thing. When I have a pig, it's also art for me. We are multiple capacity. Just we have to decide and to see what I need to do now. How I can transform, because transformation is constantly. Then how I can transform the existence every day in order to go to the next point.
Очень ускоряет процесс эволюции, когда есть кто-то, кто может подсказать. Такой человек, такой мастер может просто спасти жизнь. Есть замечательная история про человека, который стал задыхаться. Вот был некий человек, он жил в Нью-Йорке, и вот он стал задыхаться, и лицо его было красным, и он ходил ко всем врачам, его прослушивали, пускали в томограф и так далее. Говорили, мы не знаем, в чем дело. Но в конце концов он пришел к какому-то потрясающему академику. И академик сказал, я честно вам говорю, не знаю, какая болезнь, но осталось полгода. И человек подумал, ну отлично, полгода, значит, пойду-ка я куплю себе хорошую одежду. Приходит к портному и говорит, мне, пожалуйста, рубашечку, у меня 38-й, значит, размер шеи, вот. А портной померил, говорит, да нет, извините, у вас не 38-й, а 44-й. Да как, я всю жизнь покупаю 38-й размер рубашки. Портной говорит, нет, извините, если бы вы покупали 38-й, у вас бы глаза выкатывались, и лицо было бы красное, вы бы задыхались бы и умерли. Иногда вот нам нужен вот этот портной. Учитель, наставник, опытный человек, человек в телогрейке с сигареткой, который говорит, не, вот там надо повернуть его налево. Понимаете, иногда вот так это бывает. Не обязательно он должен быть в расшитых золотом одеяниях, в золотых тапках с загнутыми носами. Иногда это может быть кто-то очень простой. И для этого надо иметь в себе состояние ученика.
We each have our connections with the different world wisdom traditions and have studied them extensively throughout our lives. One of the underlying forces of all world religions is creativity. We would not know about any of the world wisdom traditions unless they had expressed themselves in great cosmic literature and in their temples and in their sculptures and their paintings. And so if art was your religion, then you'd be connected with the most ancient sacred art in the caves, the very beginning of art. And then all of artistic expression includes all world religions.
The most important reminder of this true self, myself, is silence. The reason why we tend to forget who we really are is all the distractions that we have all the time. And silence means, of course, much more than turning off the noise. Silence means quieting yourself within yourself. And that ought to be possible in the midst of a lot of noise. Just as water, when you don't stir it up, settles and becomes very clear and pure, so silence, when we cultivate it within ourselves, makes us clear and lets us see who we really are.
А истина стоит в том, чтобы быть в центре и избегать крайности. Крайность состоит в том, что я принимаю только какую-то одну точку зрения ученых или точку зрения знатоков внутреннего мира в качестве главной, отправной. Нагарджуна сказал, все правы. И вот тетралема Нагарджуны, Махаяна, как серединный путь, введенный им, недаром ее называют вторым Буддой в истории буддизма, говорит о том, что самый быстрый путь к реализации – это серединный путь. То есть практика серединного пути, практика серфинга реальности в центре, в равновесии, великое динамическое равновесие на гребне волны – важнейшая практика эволюционеров, то есть тех людей, которые заинтересованы в интенсивном развитии.
We must build little, tiny moments of stop into our day. And usually it's easiest to do that at the beginning of a new activity. So for instance, in the morning when you wake up, you can get into the habit before you open your eyes, you hear the alarm clock, and before you open your eyes, you stop for a moment. And that is enough to realize now a new day is given to me. And you will go into this new day with a completely new attitude because you now receive this day. You do something with it. You don't just rush into it. And so with every activity that you do, you stop for the briefest of moments. Doesn't even have to be 1 second. Close the door and you are in the habit, whenever you hear this click of the door, that is enough.
Realize that everything that you do that harms any other living being, or the environment even, of positive environment of another living being, is harming yourself. And that has to be transformed into positive. To such an extent that we should live as a compatible, coherent organism, species of life that is not damaging the world around it. So that means trying to live so that we don't destroy or kill. We don't diminish the chances of life also. There's a nice principle that I often talk about, ethical principle. Live in a way that others can also live.
There are certain elements of practice that I've been faithful to. I mean, particularly, certainly as physical exercise and fitness. I'm 87. I mean, you know, I walk 4 miles a day and I do what I do. I practice meditation every day. Now I have to say, though, more about the practices themselves. Let's take meditation particularly. It morphs. Practices morph. They change. That's one of the great secrets in the contemplative world. If you keep practicing the same way, your practice evolves. So let's say formal meditation practice should be giving you more what's come to be called mindfulness.
My brain waves just change immediately in less than 30 seconds. And I'm a different person now. And I'm sitting in a different way, and I'm not hitting like this anymore or like that. My shoulders, my whole body just changed. And I did one thing 3 times.
Something I found it in my own process is something also make me very happy now. Because I know me when I was 17, 18, 21, 25, even until 30 years old. I was depressed all the time. I never give a space in my talking. I never talk like that. And now I'm very happy about this, the last step in my life. I arrived to the point I enjoy very much to stop, to smile, to listen the silent, and then I can listen to you. I can interact with you, more organic. Before it was not possible for me. My bones are relaxed. I still have perhaps many problems. You cannot imagine how difficult it is for artists to survive. But I think the weight of my bones gives me a big security. And this kind of sensation of happiness. And then it's a practice, it's really very strong practice everywhere. In the most common action every day.
My understanding is that all of us pulled towards an ideal. All of us have an inner drive towards deeper understanding and to a contribution. So that takes different forms in different people. I think what has been a dynamic for me has been first to understand, to learn as much as I can, and then there was this possibility of awakening, of realizing states of consciousness and insights and understandings that really make us aware of our true identity, of who we really are, of what we are capable of becoming.
А где же я за пределами игр? Где я такой, каким я могу обозначить себя до игр? Где я такой, который ни во что не играет? И тогда ты, естественно, притягиваешь эти изумительные схемы, которые касаются и систем кашмирского шиваизма, и адвайта-веданты, и буддийских систем, пустоты, полноты, да, ты обнаруживаешь турию или состояние недвойственности, вне разделения на «я» и «ты», того, кто смотрит, и того, на что смотрит. Ты возвращаешься в то самое утробное состояние, где ты был един со Вселенной. Да, и ты обнаруживаешь тот свет, который светится из тебя этой удивительной потенцией, та самая пустота, с которой ты начал.
Для современных искателей, современных эволюционеров одинаково важны поиск реальности себя, реальности внутреннего мира, познание себя, реальности отношений с другими людьми, что самое главное здесь, и как отношения могут использоваться максимально эффективно для реализации, а также знание современной науки и системного подхода, который помогает нам становиться все более и более и более реальным, но также сокровенное знание практики равновесия, знание серединного пути, который помогает нам избегать крайностей.
We can affirm the sacred dimension that has always been, will always be, and is now seeking a new metamorphosis. We need a new way to imagine God, basically. Not these separate ways, but as a way of creating a unifying force.
Now I can feel my heartbeat. I'm switching on my parasympathetic system. I can feel my blood vessels dilating. See, we can all learn how to be sensitive to our own insides. These are the different sets of attributes in which you can see a clear line of progress through the entire kingdoms of living creatures on this earth. All right, now you do this with communication abilities, creature to creature, amoeba to amoeba, bird to bird, chimp to chimp, human to human. And we can cultivate our communication abilities. The divine is immanent in all things. Henri Bergson said the universe is a machine for the creation of gods.
We become disenchanted, we say in English. I took it literally to mean that if you're going to be re-enchanted, to be made magical again through sound, is to chant. So the question was, if we're going to chant, what are we going to chant?
They realized structures didn't exhaust the whole picture, that there were other dimensions, other aspects of being human. And one of them wasn't just growing up, it was waking up. It was enlightenment. It was awakening. It was awareness and consciousness and love and creativity and a supreme identity, a unity with ultimate spirit. And it's driven by, in most cases, what is generally called the Bodhisattva vow, which simply says, I vow to gain enlightenment as quickly as I can so I can help all others awaken as well.
Somehow a lot of the suffering and also the fact that we live in anxiety is unprocessed birth experience. So change of birth practices. Ideally, I would create special environment for women who are pregnant. I think we would save money, even give them a vacation somewhere in the mountains, create an ideal situation for the fetus rather than having them a situation where they fly jets.
You are exposed, like the sun, to all the different musics of different cultures, planets, possibilities, sounds, healings. Give the voice, the practices, the sounds, the songs, the chants that will make the voice travel. The voice is our pranic possibility to journey.
Наверное, все самые главные наши проблемы связаны с тем, что мы ограничиваем себя, что мы утратили связь с бесконечностью. То есть мы должны понять, как работает наше восприятие, и начать освобождать его от тех клеток, в которые мы живем. Но это возможно только через внимательное исследование и самоисследование с привлечением всех знаний, которые открыло человечество на пути ко все большей и большей реальности. Ведь говорил же когда-то Уильям Блейк, если бы двери восприятия были очищены, все предстало бы перед нами, как оно есть. Бесконечно.
This mysterious field that you can't quite see, or the field, the sense of the earth, the atmosphere.
Being in touch with it.
Being in touch with it, and it's kind of unified place that includes all the different parts, but is more than them. Being in touch with that, then you're able to facilitate groups and individual work better and all of these different
Your
things.
own life, otherwise you don't feel
Your
it.
own
You
life.
feel something's missing today. What's missing? What is it? It's this, almost always this. Being moved by something that you can't quite put your finger on.
The way forward is not the way to just by super technology. It's the way to go inside ourselves, recognize this tendency, and they use technology. I'm not against technology, but use technology to facilitate the development of these harmonies, of this high level of oneness. You don't have to go back to the primitive area and live on water and plants, although that's a good healthy living also. But we can use the modern lifestyles to express this harmony or oneness. If we are more part of each other, more of a positive element, then we are also in tune with the evolution of the cosmos.
Artists whose message is powerful and personal. Their own personal point of view is expressed through their art. Other people are attracted to it. It encourages them to either make art that expressive of their own point of view. Art does evolve consciousness. You see it all around you when artists move into a neighborhood and it gets better, you know, and then it becomes affluent and gentrified. Everybody wants art in their life. They want culture in their life. And places that are devoid of culture are usually very depressed.
Wisdom is a deep insight and understanding of both oneself and the central existential issues of life, those issues that all of us face simply by virtue of being human. Questions of meaning and purpose and how to relate to suffering and how to relate to others, plus the capacity to respond to these issues skillfully and benevolently.
I think that shift from the masculine orientation of our society and including the feminine, creating much more balance, would really help the planet tremendously.
You need a big picture. Humans need it. Where there is no vision, the people will perish, said one of the great Jewish prophets. We need a developing worldview, philosophy, conceptual framework. We need to embrace research. Now that's a subject in itself. There are different kinds of research. Thirdly, we need to keep developing our practices. And fourthly, we need to keep experimenting with social structures that foster all the above.
И человек взрывается пониманием, что он больше, чем то, каким он себя видел на протяжении всей жизни. Оказывается, я большой. Оказывается, я разный. Оказывается, во мне спит потенциал всей Вселенной. Оказывается, во мне спит грандиозный художник. Каким бы делом я ни занимался, я через это дело могу транслировать свою целостность. И нет ничего более фундаментального, чем обнаружить эту целостность и интегрировать ее в любой аспект того, чем я занимаюсь. Если я домохозяйка, я могу использовать драматургию домохозяйки для того, чтобы тренировать свою целостность.
To my mind, this is the most important thing that we recover at this time, ability to love each other on a planetary scale.
Just a few words, it's to awaken, to love, to serve or contribute, and to enjoy.
Sing, you have a voice. Proverb, if you talk, you can sing. If you move, you can dance. I believe in that. So the other point, which we don't have time to talk, is do you believe that you believe? And it's important that we believe that everything I just say, or who cares if we believe it?
Now I learned something. Now I'm the best. I'm the absolute greatest. And that needs support. Do your own thing. Develop something new. Please, go ahead. And everybody grows up and has to leave home. Go ahead and say, woof, and grow. I think that's important. And then, at a certain time in your life when you're ready, can you turn around and see everybody as your sister and brother? Can you see everybody as your mother and your son, and you one family? Because if you can do that, that will help especially the world work element of our planet.
The great task in our time is to achieve unity and harmony of the human family. among all humans. Go to other people and see how you are related to them. For instance, invite people from other traditions to sing together with you. What do they like to do? Maybe they like to play football with me. If Muslims and Christians and Jews were playing football with one another, there would be a completely different world already. Or sing together, make music together. On this level, the interreligious dialogue has enormous chances if we awake for it, if we do it.